Every evening at exactly 6 o'clock, George Harrison arrived at the Golden Swan restaurant. He always arrived on time, never early and never late. Routine had become George's anchor in a world that no longer spoke to him. 6 o'clock was familiar. The lighting was gentle, the staff predictable, and his usual table by the window always waited for him. He liked that table because he could watch the street outside and feel the faint vibrations of passing cars through the glass. George was in his early 70s. His silver hair was neatly combed, his posture straight, and his clothes carefully pressed. His kind eyes carried decades of memories, years of hard work, success, love, and loss. Over 40 years, George had built a construction company from the ground up. He had been strong, ambitious, and respected. But life had taken something from him that money could not replace. Sound. George had been completely deaf for nearly 10 years. At first, the hearing loss had been gradual. Conversations became difficult. Music faded. Eventually, silence became permanent. He adapted as best he could, learning to read lips, carrying a notepad, relying on gestures. Still, silence had a way of isolating him, building invisible walls between him and the rest of the world. The staff at the Golden Swan understood him well. They communicated patiently, writing notes or pointing to items on the menu. George always thanked them with a smile and generous tips. He appreciated kindness, especially when it was given without pity. Other diners noticed him too. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with sympathy. A wealthy old man dining alone every evening, surrounded by conversations he could not hear. George pretended not to notice, but the loneliness settled deeper with each passing year. 5 years earlier, his wife Margaret had passed away. They had been married for over 4 decades. She had been his greatest joy and his steady support. When she died, the house they had shared became unbearably quiet. Their children lived far away now, busy with their own families and responsibilities. They called when they could and visited when possible, but life rarely slowed down. The Golden Swan became George's refuge, a place where he could feel part of life. One Thursday evening, something unexpected caught his attention. At the far end of the restaurant, a young woman pushed a cleaning cart between tables. She worked carefully, her movements practiced but tired. Strapped to her chest in a worn baby carrier was a small infant. George paused, watching. The woman looked to be in her late 20s. Her eyes showed exhaustion, but her smile was warm and gentle. The baby nestled against her chest had dark curls and bright, curious eyes that followed everything around her. Her name was Maria Santos. Maria had come to this country 3 years earlier with hopes of building a better life. She worked 2 jobs to support her infant daughter, Isabella. Her husband had returned to their homeland when life became too difficult, leaving Maria to raise their child alone in a foreign place. 2. The restaurant manager had hesitated to allow Maria to bring her baby to work. But Maria had no family nearby and no money for childcare. She needed the job desperately. She promised Isabella would be quiet. She promised she would manage. And most nights she did. As Maria cleaned tables, Isabella watched the lights and movement around her. She made small cooing sounds, sounds only her mother could hear. George returned to his meal, but a strange feeling pulled at his attention. Movement. He looked up just in time to see tiny hands reaching toward him. Isabella had fixed her gaze on George. Maria was busy apologizing to another customer and didn't notice at first. Isabella began to wiggle in her carrier, leaning forward with surprising strength. Her curiosity grew until she fussed loudly enough to draw attention. When Maria finally noticed where her daughter was looking, her heart dropped. She recognized George as a regular customer. She could not afford to disturb anyone. Panic tightened her chest, but Isabella had already made her decision. Maria carefully crossed the dining room and approached George's table, apologizing softly. George, of course, could not hear her. What he saw instead was unforgettable. Isabella's face lit up with a smile so bright it seemed to soften the entire room. She looked at him without fear or hesitation. George felt something stir deep inside his chest. He smiled back. His smile was slow and genuine. His eyes crinkled at the corners, and for a moment the years fell away. Maria noticed his hearing aids and understood. She pulled out her phone and typed a message. "I'm so sorry, sir. She seems very drawn to you. I'll take her away." George read the message, then gently shook his head. He pulled out his notepad and wrote carefully, "Please don't apologize. She is beautiful. May I say hello to her?" Maria felt tears rise unexpectedly. She nodded and stepped closer. Isabella reached out and wrapped her tiny fingers around George's weathered hand. Though her hand was small, her grip was strong. George felt warmth spread through him. It had been so long since touch had meant something so meaningful. Isabella babbled happily. George laughed, a sound unused for years but full of joy. For several minutes they communicated without words. George waved his napkin like a puppet. Isabella giggled loudly, her laughter filling the restaurant. He exaggerated his expressions and she responded with delight. Maria watched in amazement. Before returning to work, George wrote another note. "What is her name?" "Isabella," Maria typed. "And I'm Maria." "I'm George," he wrote. "It has been my pleasure to meet you both." He added one final question. "Will you be here again?" Maria hesitated, then typed, "Thursdays and Fridays." George smiled. "Then I hope she visits me again." From that night on, Thursdays and Fridays changed. George still arrived at 6 o'clock, but now he looked forward to those evenings. When Maria's work brought her near his table, Isabella reached for him eagerly. George greeted her with playful expressions that never failed to make her laugh. George began bringing small gifts, a stuffed rabbit, colorful blocks, and picture books. Maria tried to refuse, but George insisted, writing, "Please let an old man spoil her a little." Weeks passed, then months. Through notes and shared moments, they learned about one another. Maria shared her dream of becoming a teacher and the struggle of raising a child alone. George spoke of his wife, his loneliness, and how silence had changed his life. One Friday evening, Maria arrived with red, swollen eyes. She typed quickly, "My babysitter quit. I may lose my morning job. I don't know what to do." George read the message twice. Then he wrote slowly and carefully, "I'm retired. My days are empty. It would be my honor to watch Isabella while you work." Maria stared at him, shocked. "I couldn't ask that of you," she typed. "You're not asking," George replied. "I'm offering." After a long pause, Maria said yes. A new chapter began. 3 mornings a week, Maria brought Isabella to George's quiet house. The rooms that had once held only memories filled with movement and joy. Though George could not hear Isabella's laughter, he felt it in the rhythm of her movements and the warmth she brought into his life. George read to her, played with her, and rocked her to sleep. Maria worked with peace in her heart, knowing her daughter was safe and loved. George's children noticed the change in him. There was purpose in his days again. At Thanksgiving, George invited Maria and Isabella to join his family. His home was full of warmth, love, and shared gratitude. George stood and spoke slowly. "I am grateful for second chances," he said, "and for the family we choose." Years passed. Isabella took her first steps toward George's open arms. Her first words sounded like his name. Maria completed her studies and began building a new future. And every Thursday and Friday evening, at exactly 6 o'clock, they still met at the Golden Swan restaurant, where one baby's smile had changed everything, because love does not need sound, only an open heart.